today's video, I'm joined by FUTWIZ Pro player FUTWIZ Dylan, and he's going to bring you the 5 best tips to get better at FIFA 23.
Okay, so the first tip that I think is essential for you to implement into FIFA 23 is using manual runs. That's using L1 and R1 to trigger runs in behind and short, respectively. So let's get right into a couple examples. Okay, so as you can see here, what makes this whole attack is me using L1 to trigger Lacazette in behind. What that ends up enabling is me to play that through ball in behind for Lacazette. So if you see early on in the sequence, just before I play it back to Seedorf, I tap L1 in this position. Lacazette makes his run in behind, opens up heaps of space for the through ball, and a very easy finish in the end. So this is a very similar example to the previous one. I end up triggering Kaka in behind, but what ends up happening, I notice that he's tracking the run, so I bring it back for Kaka short, and that ends up allowing me to play the pass into his feet, another easy ball in behind for Payet, and then the chance really opens up from there. Everything that I do in that sequence is all manual. I make the run in behind. Because he's been tracking that run, I noticed that I've got to bring him short, and then that just opens up the whole play for me.
I feel like this is a good one to start on as well, because like a lot of, I guess, casual not pro FIFA players, a lot of casual FIFA players wouldn't know this. They can actually trigger the runs either like you just mentioned there, bringing them short, pressing R1 on the PlayStation, or when you want them in behind, triggering the run with L1. One thing I want to ask you, Dylan, because this is kind of, you know, hotly debated whether people have getting behind on their strikers or come to feet. What do you have on yours, and what do you think works best?
So I usually just play balanced on my strikers. I do have direct passing, which kind of helps with those runs in like the final third. But especially in that example there, like I triggered the run way earlier, so it definitely helps out like using these manual L1, R1 triggers, because you're not only relying on the game to make runs for you, and sometimes the game does make runs in behind, for example, where you just don't want them to. Yeah. So if you do it this way, it kind of allows you to control a lot more of your attack, and especially the build-up, where, you know, in some scenarios, if you want your attacker to come to feet and like the game just making a run in behind, it's going to ruin your whole attack. So this is definitely something that helps heaps with just the generic like flow of your attack and how you want to be building up. Okay, so there's one variation of these manual runs in behind called a creative run. And how you do that is you do the same thing. You tap L1 to trigger the run. But at the same time, when you're looking at the attacker that you want to be triggering, you flick the right stick in the direction you want them to run. So you can see here, Mbappe changes his direction completely, and I make a different run with him. That gives me heaps of space in behind. And at that point, it's just a totally different mechanic, because your opponent is obviously going to be focused on tracking the run in behind. But if you do that sharp change of direction, it makes it very difficult to defend.
It's interesting that you've spoken about this one, Dylan, because I swear I've accidentally always triggered that. Like I've tried to trigger running behind, then I've accidentally moved my right stick one way, and I'm going like, why are they running there? But obviously I haven't got it down packed, and I don't know what I'm doing. So that's good to know. I'm going to hopefully put it in the right way next time.
So my second tip for you is to press tackle or circle or B, whichever console you're on, this year, as opposed to just jockeying. Now, in previous FIFAs, a lot of the time how you would defend is you just run into your opponent. This year, I don't think it's as effective doing that, and you need to be able to press tackle to win the ball a lot more cleanly. You'll notice with Bellingham, I try to run into the attacker, and what ends up happening is it just goes straight through me, kind of like morphs through. With Lucio, on the contrary, I wait, I set myself up really well, and it's a really strong challenge where I press circle and win the ball cleanly.
I feel like it's, even hearing you mention this one, Dylan, some people might be watching it and going, what do you mean, like, press tackle? Like, what do you think I'm doing? But even coming from personal experience, like back in even FIFA 20, so people that have played the old FIFAs, in FIFA 20, I totally had to train my brain to stop pressing tackle at all, because you could just jockey into people and win the ball every time. But I think like a problem for me, and probably other people watching this as well, is our muscle memory is just jockeying and running into people, when, as you mentioned, that doesn't really work as well this year. So we need to get used to tackling, timing the tacklings right, using B or circle, whichever console you're on. And as you can see there, that pretty much perfectly highlights it in that clip. I feel like what happened with Bellingham is what I'm doing way too much all around the pitch. But yeah, and then that big tackle from Lucio perfectly highlights what I need to be doing more.
The third thing that you need to implement into your game is crossing. Now this year, it's incredibly overpowered because what happens a lot of the time is defenders don't actually lock onto the cross and your attacker is always there. So if you notice your attackers peeling off at the back post, or if they're making a run in behind, it's definitely worth implementing this into your game. And I'm going to go through a couple examples now and situations where a cross is really desirable. So this first example showcases a cross that works very consistently on FIFA 23, where if you can see here, I bring it wide with Davies, and what you'll notice is I've got a numbers overload here. There's 3 attackers versus 2 defenders. Now what ends up happening heaps of the time is the 2 defenders will try and mark the 2 nearest players. So in this instance, Lucio's tracking the Mbappe run, and Davies has come across to mark R9. Now because the defender's moving towards the ball, that means I can play it over the defender to the back post, where you see Alvarez, he's got his arm up, he'll wait for the ball at the back post, and because of Davies' positioning, he can't get there, and very easy finish in the end. Okay, so this second example is very similar. You'll notice what happens is the defender tracks the near post, and that leaves Lacazette back post for me. Very similar to the previous example. You can see it works very consistently. Once you get into those areas, it's literally all about your aiming. Like if you aim the header on target, you will score 100% of the time. This is something that's very simple to do, and as Jamie mentioned before, like when you get into the habit of not waiting for the ball to be on, but proactively looking for it, that's when it'll become very effective for you.
I think that one there actually probably highlights that a bit more, because you're probably looking at the point where you have the ball to cross it in, and you look at Lacazette, it's like he's not actually in a position to really score from a header there, or it's not a perfect position for a cross, but by the time you power it up and he's going to still be running and the AI is still going to be running, you know by the time it gets to him, it's a perfect opportunity.
So I'll give one final example of crossing, and this is very prevalent in the pro scene. If you watch competitive FIFA, you would have seen a lot of pros using this, and it's commonly referred to as the German cross. Pretty much all it is when you whip across from a deep area and you send a player on a run, similar to how like Trent Alexander-Arnold would cross IRL. So
I think it's perfect as well, Dylan. You've already mentioned like triggering the runs at the start of the video, so it's pretty much that's what people are going to want to be doing to get the player in the box, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. So as you can see here, when I play the ball back, I trigger the run with Bellingham using L1, like we spoke about earlier. And at that point, I'm very unlucky not to score. But it's one of those things where, especially if you play someone who's only second man pressing, like through the middle of the pitch, it can create a lot of good chances for you, and it forces your opponent to try and mark different things, and that will end up opening a lot more space for you when you're just attacking in a more natural way, I guess you could say.
I feel like it's one of those things as well, Dylan. It's not like you wouldn't want to base your game around scoring all your goals with this technique, but it's kind of like a set piece, you know. If you've tried your main game and that's not working, it's something else you can throw into the mix. And as we've spoken about in so many of these tutorial videos or tips videos, you want as many different things in your game as possible. So this is just another one. It's something that, yeah, it won't be easy to learn at the start, but if you keep trying to do it, you'll see the success eventually.
Right, so the next thing that I think you must implement is having a few different set piece routines, especially corners, just so that like you're not always relying on one routine that if your opponent marks, pretty much nullifies any threat. Now, I'll go through 2 examples here of set pieces that I think work really well. And there's a couple different variations you can put on these. Like in this first one, you'll see I end up playing short to Kaka, and I run to the edge of the box. Because he hasn't marked it, I've just done a finesse shot from outside the box there. What you can also do in those scenarios is just play across the back post, but that's a very easy one to implement.
And if you guys have been watching our tutorials on this channel for a while, you would have noticed that Dylan and I did already a set piece tutorial video, but there's been many patches in the game and all those set piece routines we showed have been patched now. They're not effective anymore. And Dylan's going to show you a new one, which at this moment in time in the game still works perfectly.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So this is another example of a corner variation. I put about 2.5 bars of power. I aim it towards the near post. I don't move the left stick too much. I don't change how I've positioned the spin on the ball whatsoever. Cross it near post, green header to the far post. This is something that works very well, especially if your opponent does not move his keeper. This is one that's kind of been floating around the pro scene for the past year, I want to say. But it's very good again this year, and what it's commonly referred to in the competitive scene is the Russian corner. What you're going to want to do is you aim towards the edge of the box, because what you'll notice, if you've got your corner set to 2 in your custom tactics, you'll always have a big player, either one of your centre backs or a tall midfielder, standing on the edge of the box where Lucio is. and that player will always be marked by a small attacker. So you see here, I aim for Lucio, I put just under maximum power, I switch using L1 to Lucio. Now at this point, Lucio is on Neymar. Lucio is obviously always going to win the header. I use player lock, which is another mechanic. You press the left stick and the right stick in at the same time, and very quickly after doing that, I flick my right stick towards one of my players inside the box, and I press X to knock it down with Lucio. Now you can see here, knocks down to Ramos, and he's unmarked in the box, and a lot of the time that will be the case. So it's just one of those which is a bit more complicated, but if you learn this as another variation, it's definitely going to be something that catches your opponent off guard and might chip in to score like that decisive goal in the end.
I was going to say, like, I think mechanically wise, this is probably the hardest thing in the whole entire video to master. But I think the way that Dylan's described it and given you a rundown of how to do it, it's one of those things. You might need to watch it twice, you might need to watch it 10 times. Just go back and refer to each little bit what Dylan's talking about. And when you're trying it yourself, just keep practicing it, because it's not one of those things where you can just press a button and then you score a goal and it's that easy. This is a bit more complex, but if you practice it and you do everything right, you'll see the rewards of it.
So my final tip for you to improve on FIFA 23 is to master goalkeeper movement. Now this is a mechanic that should only really be used as a last resort if all else fails defensively. And you'll notice in these examples, like, I can't do anything apart from moving my goalkeeper to try to save a goal. So one of the best ways to do this, and it's not something that a lot of casuals do, is to move your goalkeeper backwards and then to the side. What a lot of, just average FUT Champions players would do who use this mechanic is pick a side and move the keeper to that side. Now, what ends up happening when you move your keeper backwards, and you can see in this example, is it kind of throws off your opponent because you're not moving it completely to one side where they can just shoot it to the opposite side and it's a free goal. It almost confuses them, and at the same time, there'll be a clip coming up next. It cuts off two angles at the exact same time. So it's something that's very overpowered, and it'll definitely throw off your opponent in these one-on-one scenarios and could save you a game.
I think it was perfect as well, Dylan, at the start that you kind of mentioned it is more of a last resort. Like, I guess mechanically wise, doing goalkeeper movement is just pushing the right stick in, right, and then toggling it to which side you want to move it. That isn't, I guess, the hard part about goalkeeper movement. It's like, it's throwing your opponent off. It's more mind games, and it's more kind of trying to guess the way they're going to shoot more than anything, more than mechanically have to do it. But it's also, like you said as well, it's not something you want to be doing all the time, because then you can just get caught out as well.
Okay, so this is the clip that I was referring to. Now, in a lot of these areas, when your opponent's on like the side of the box and they're trying to shoot across goal, you can see my right stick in the top corner. I'm moving the right stick down so the keeper comes back towards his line. And what ends up happening in these positions, either side of the box, if your opponent's trying to shoot across goal, if you move the keeper in this way, it'll cut off both the near post shot and the far post, which makes it pretty much impossible for your opponent to score unless they green time the shot and your keeper makes a terrible mistake. So in these situations, it's something that's definitely very easy to implement into a game. As Jamie said, it's like only something that you should really be using in these scenarios where you can't do anything else. But if it can save you a goal, it's really one of those which, can flip a game on its head, because your opponent every time after this is going to be questioning, right, do I need to shoot near post? Do I need to shoot far post? It's all about the mind games.
I feel like it's all about the percentages as well. In this scenario, the percentage of him actually shooting across goal and scoring is higher if you don't move your goalkeeper. And then, like you said, if you're moving him backwards and kind of diagonally there, it's not leaving the front post open either. Because I'm going to be honest right now and say this is something I do. I don't actually move my goalkeeper backwards. I'm guilty of it. I'm going to put my hands up right now. But thanks, Dylan, for mentioning that, because now I'm going to change it. So many times in this scenario, Dylan, I feel like, okay, I'm just going to move him to the side. I'm going to block that across goal. I'm going to move him a little bit, and then he just shoots front post. And like my keeper's, not saving that. So I feel like in a scenario, I've actually made it a high percentage chance of him scoring because my goalkeeper movement was actually wrong mechanically. So that's a good point as well. As always, guys, with these sorts of video where there's 5 new things to learn, what I would personally do is get 1 or maximum 2 things that you want to implement to your game at one time. Focus on those first, and then come back to this video and learn the other ones. Because I think there's nothing worse when you're trying to learn new things as a FIFA player and try and learn too many things at once, because you won't end up mastering them and there won't be muscle memory. So go through this video again. You might have to watch it a few times, refer back to it, especially when Dylan's talking about the timing of things and the exact control of things. But even from me personally, once again, I've learned something new today, Dylan, so thank you for that.
No worries, Jamie. Hopefully it can help you get rank 1 in Foot Champs for the first time this year.
Yeah, but rank 1, I haven't even got a rank 2 yet, but yeah, rank 2 is coming soon. Like and subscribe, guys, for more videos, and we'll see you next time.